Throughout our early childhood, we all likely had dreams of taking our personal jet to our private island one day, living a wealthy lifestyle completely off the beaten path. However, little did we know that many private islands have been completely abandoned by their owners over the years. The abandonment of some of these islands is completely understandable given the circumstances, though others were left vacant in rather mysterious ways and are still uninhabited to this day. Number 12. Japan is home to many of the world's most powerful and successful businesses and corporations. Mitsubishi is one such company that planted its roots in Japan over 100 years ago. In the early 1900s, Mitsubishi was a well-established company who was in search of coal to extend their business's profits. They located a small island off the coast of Nagasaki, known as Gunkanjima. The island was developed by Mitsubishi after they had reason to believe that the island was sitting on top of a large coal deposit. They were correct in these assumptions, and Mitsubishi began mining the coal and producing over 400,000 tons of coal each year. They began opening up factories in the area and even helped to develop a town around the coal business. They helped the city form and flourish, with the city becoming so dense and overrun with businesses and buildings that it earned the nickname Island Without Green. As time marched on, the coal began to run low. Mitsubishi eventually closed the doors of the factory, and everyone who inhabited the city gradually left, largely because there were no additional jobs available in the area. The island was abandoned and left as a ghost town, and it has now been sitting vacant for over 40 years. Number 11. The port of an island known as Spock and Wasp is known to have been crucial for many powerful empires over the last 3,000 years. The island is found on the Red Sea nearby Sudan and was originally built sometime around the 10th century. The island was extremely important as it offered a trade route and exploration outlet for many of those who were passing by. The island remained very well kept and prominent over the years, and it was eventually converted into a place for the rich elite to live and was widely considered to be one of the most luxurious cities in the area. Though as years went by, the island lost its reputation and it eventually became a home for the slave trade by the 1800s. This is ultimately what led to the island's eventual downfall by the late 1800s and early 1900s. By the 1920s, the island was completely falling apart and was left abandoned. To this day, the island is still abandoned and only a shell of its former glory remains. Many of its landmark buildings have begun to crumble as the city is gradually reclaimed by the earth it was built upon. Number 10. Back during the plagues of the 18th century, a small island located a short distance away from Venice was found and used as a destination for all of the plague-affected individuals. These people were removed from society and placed on the island so that the rest of the country could live out their lives with only minimal fear of plague infection. Because of this, over 160,000 individuals lost their lives on the island, with some estimates indicating that over 50% of the soil on the island contains decomposed human remains. This allegation has never been confirmed, but considering the size of the island and the number of people who lost their lives there, the numbers could certainly add up. To this day, the island is off limits to the general public. It is widely assumed to be haunted and has become a hotspot for paranormal investigators and ghost hunters over the years. There are still a handful of structures and operations on the island, but the vast majority of its landmass is left in complete disrepair. Number 9. No Man's Land is the name given to a now landmark piece of history that was built during the Victorian era as a way to defend the coastline from the potential threats of a French invasion. These seaforts were built to be the home for many of their occupants for several months or years at a time. However, by the time construction had been completed, they were completely outdated and essentially useless. Later on during World War I, the forts operated as defense stations against submarine attacks, but they were eventually left abandoned once again. They were then used as a luxury resort, but this idea proved to be fruitless and it too closed its doors. Finally, the man-made island was purchased by a hotel for $6 million, but a disease outbreak led to the end of the business and again it was abandoned. The owner of the hotel then decided to lock himself into the island and allow no visitors for many years. He was eventually found out and evicted in 2009, and the island remains abandoned once again. Number 8. In recent years, there have been whispers that this island may be revamped and used again in the future, but for the moment, this island fits the bill because it is currently abandoned. Disney's Discovery Island is likely one of the most popular abandoned islands in the world. There have been several documentaries made that tell the story of the island, but it was originally built as an animal safari island inside of Disney World. It was home to numerous exotic animals, but the park eventually closed in 1999, and the island was left abandoned after Disney had completed work on the new Animal Kingdom resort. The island has remained untouched since the 1990s, though several individuals have made their way onto the island to document the decaying piece of history. We will have to wait and see what the future may hold for Discovery Island, but for the moment, it remains a forgotten piece of Disney's expansive history. Number 7. McNab Island is a Canadian piece of land that has been home to numerous businesses, factories, and war materials over the years. The island was first occupied by Peter McNab and his family in the late 1700s, but it was eventually abandoned in the 1930s after the McNab family died off. No settlements or buildings have been placed there since. It was used briefly in World War II, but since the conclusion of the war, it was left abandoned. It is now home to numerous pieces of history that pertain to the war, several decaying structures, homes, burial plots, shipwrecks, and numerous other curious landmarks. The island has a lot of history, but Canadians have simply decided to leave the land in disrepair and allow it to be reclaimed by nature, at least for now. Number 6. Deception Island is said to be one of the safest areas in Antarctica. It has been a refuge for storms and icebergs for many years, but has now been deserted. Many buildings still stand on the island, but they are slowly being taken away by rust and storms. It was once one of the most popular destinations in Antarctica for researchers and scientists, but it is now a shell of what it once was. A volcano is located nearby the island, which erupted twice in the 1960s, sending all those who inhabited the island far away. Since then, the island has been left abandoned and untouched, with the volcano now forming hot springs in the nearby areas. Number 5. Back in the 1800s, a wealthy family known as the Carnegies owned about 90% of Cumberland Island, located just off the coast of Georgia. On the island, they built a 59-room mansion that the family used only as a winter vacation home. The building was kept up until the late 1920s, when the Great Depression hit. Around this time, it was completely abandoned and left unkept for decades. In 1959, a large fire consumed nearly the entire mansion, leaving behind only a few exterior walls and a minor amount of roofing. To this day, the island is completely abandoned, but is visited frequently by guests who want to take a glimpse back into the history of the once thriving area. Number 4. Ross Island was originally established by the British colonists back in the 18th century. However, in more recent years, it has been abandoned completely and is left to decay. Several structures remain on the island, including numerous homes, a church, a store, a swimming pool, a hospital, and a bazaar. Many of these buildings were constructed with heavy-duty brick, meaning that they are all mostly still standing. However, their internals have been gutted or decayed over the years, leaving behind nothing but external walls and pillars. The island has been left vacant since 1942, when it was invaded by Japan. Several bunkers can still be seen throughout the island, but it is now considered to be a ghost town. Number 3. Juan Ponce de Leon first discovered the dry Tortugas back in 1513. At that time, the island was little more than a cluster of coral that had been inhabited by sea turtles. De Leon eventually named the island Las Tortugas, which translates to the turtles, with over 160 of these turtles being consumed by him while he was away on his journey. The island quickly became a hub for shipping and trading, but also caused dozens of shipwrecks in the area. The island was later known as Ship Trap Island due to the sheer amount of wrecks that took place there annually. Several of the shipwrecks were never recovered, and it is estimated that millions of dollars in lost goods remain below the water surface to this day. Fort Jefferson was set to be one of the most prominent buildings on the island, though its construction was never completed. Over 16 million bricks were laid, but the project was abandoned due to a lack of interest in 1874. Portions of it were used as a hospital during the war many years later, and the entire island is now considered to be a national park, ranking as one of the least visited national parks in American history. Number 2. The stilt village of Yukon Vaak is located on King Island, just off the coast of Alaska. This area was originally home to natives who traveled the seas, but it has now been abandoned for over 50 years. The village and its homes were built on a hillside, where they remain to this day, untouched for nearly half a century. The local people were once referred to as the people of the sea, with many of the original inhabitants now living on mainland Alaska. The island was abandoned for seemingly no reason. Most of those who ventured out from the island fully intended to return, but simply never did so. The island is now frozen in time, waiting to be reclaimed by the natural elements. Number 1. An island known as San Giorgio in Alga was built just off of the Venetian coast. The island was first located back in 1000 CE and has been home to countless settlements over the years. In the 1900s, it became home to base operations of the Nazi regime, though it was abandoned after World War II and has been sitting vacant ever since. Numerous old religious artifacts have been found on the island, and loads of pre-war memorabilia have been found as well. In the years since the war, the island has been ransacked and all of the Nazi propaganda and affiliated items have been removed, with the item now sitting empty waiting to be washed away by the surrounding waters.